Hello and welcome back to AB in Focus. Today we are joined by none other than Abdulaziz Al Roomi, HR expert, executive coach and all-round leader. Abdulaziz, thank you for joining me today and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Abdulaziz, you're obviously an expert in all matters when it comes to HR, and you've dealt with a whole bunch of different leaders as well and have a huge amount of knowledge when it comes to leadership, which puts you, I think, in quite an interesting position where you are able to see different leaders from all over the world and how they adapt to different environments. So, interesting question to start with, I think. How do you see the different qualities of leaders when you compare them geographically? Say, leaders from the Western world style of management compared to leaders from maybe the East, and how they combine and interact with one another?
Thank you for asking this question. We've always been having this challenge that why things don't work out the way we read it in books. Especially most of the books or the theories in leadership comes from the West, which covers only 500 million of population compared to the other 8 billion. So the essentials of leadership is the same: integrity to be always the number one, quality of a leader, enthusiasm, being humble and what have you. However, the leadership style and the management style differs because of the different culture. So let's start in, let's say, the Middle East. In Dubai or in the GCC region, we always have this sheikh, the tribe. For a leader here, to be a leader of a group, they need to give first, then receive. Then they have the authority, where it's different than the West. West is more about achievement because it's more individualistic type of culture versus the collective kind of culture and mindset here. So there you need to prove yourself, then you can be the leader, and then you can always give back to the people. So in comparing those two different models, we see that the people in the East usually are autocratic. They like hierarchy. They appreciate coming on time every time rather than being relaxed but being more creative. So that's why we see more creativity in the West, more disciplined in the East. Another thing would be communication style. Here we are more rhetoric, more family oriented. It's not easy to make friends with an Arab leader. However, once you are in the circle, then you are in. You're one of them. The other thing that even probing for question or asking for a suggestion is way more encouraged back in the West versus here in the East, where you're questioning my authority. Last but not least would be how we get things done. There it's more individualistic, celebration. Even the way they play football, you can see everyone makes their own. If you compare it, for example, to Japan, where the sumo wrestler who wins is always humble to celebrate their victory. And this very much close to where we are. And I think we see this conflict of when I'm in an interview or someone asks me, why do you think you deserve a promotion or be hired? Usually, the Eastern folks are more humble and they don't do very well because they don't know how to talk about their achievement versus the people usually living in the West do a better job.
Well, that's interesting. And given how many leaders you work with, I think there's an obvious question here, which is to say, which are the most important qualities of leadership then, and how do you compare them between those two different styles?
Okay. So the core is the same. However, the way we do things are different. So when it comes to the East, it's more about delivering quality, discipline, living for the greater good, doing things for the greater good, not so much for a purpose. It's more about what is your legacy. And we always compare things, even when we hire people, who is their background, where do they come from? So we have this, unfortunately, a lot of the stereotypes while doing things. When it comes to the West, it's more about what did you do, what's the achievement, and how can you fit in. They take culture, values, mission, and vision seriously, and they put it into practice. And that's why many people here feel it's more of a cliche, where I don't believe it is. I believe it's deep-rooted, and it is original, it is real, that delivers business results.
You mentioned there about culture. Talk to me about what do you think the importance of culture is, and how important is it for leaders to foster a specific type of culture?
Well, you know what the saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast? It's always true, because organizations are designed to deliver the results they do. So if things didn't work out, is because we as leaders, HR, management, didn't make it work. So culture is how we do things, how people perceive us as leaders, and how they assume things will get done. So if we are aware of what message we want to send across and how we want things to get done, then this will definitely impact if we're going to achieve a certain strategy, a certain vision or not. So if we keep saying things that are on paper while doing the other, definitely it's a mess, and it will demotivate not only the people, it will affect the employer brand, which is huge, that we need to take seriously here in the Middle East.
I want to come to that topic of motivation in a second, but before we get there, let's just stick with this. What specific things can leaders do to help encourage a culture that they believe in and a culture which also empowers businesses?
Excellent. It starts actually from the talent acquisition. There are two things. There is the outside-in approach and there is inside-out approach. So outside-in approach is basically mimicking the message that we give or we want to intend and send to our customers. If we say that we are innovative or customer-centric or reliable, then we need to hire those people who demonstrate these things naturally in their DNA. And that's what the role of the culture fit. So bring the right people in, have the right leaders there, and what we define as the leadership brand of the organization. Do we have the right leaders that will deliver the message that we have? Do we have the right processes, the systems that will help us deliver that message that we want, the results that we want? Now, that means that we need to give away things and just comparing to what we see most value. I like always to go back to the term values because it defines what is right and wrong within the organization. So it's not right or wrong globally. It is we favor innovation, creativity, taking risks, failing forward versus reliability and quality. Both are important, but this is more important to us. So we bring the right culture, right leaders, the right people to make sure this culture is alive and contributing towards our vision. If we compare, for example, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, they're all tech savvy or all tech based organizations. But why each organization have its own different culture? Because basically they know how they're delivering value, and they do it through their values and their culture.
It's a really interesting point you have there, because those big companies you mentioned do have incredibly different cultures and values as well. So I think the obvious question is, how do you define what values are important?
Excellent. So the values is the core of an organization. A mission, a vision can change. Strategy definitely can change. But the core values are the things that we live for, that we appreciate, that are religious to us, and what makes us different. So let's say, for example, for a household, the parent, they define the values. So let's say our household, is well known, or we appreciate being conservative, or being global, or being highly educated. Then it doesn't matter which field my kids will take, as long as they have the highest degrees in that field, for example. Or let's say this family appreciates entrepreneurship. So most likely their kids will end up being an entrepreneur one way or the other, but you don't decide on the field. And this is what we refer to as a competency framework. So a competency is how an individual, a leader, contribute within the ecosystem of the organization, which is the values.
All right, well, look, I promise that we come back to this topic of motivation. So let's talk about organizations and motivation, employee well-being. Two questions here, I think, to begin with. Firstly, how important is it to keep employees motivated? I think the answer is obvious, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. And two, how do we go about doing that?
Okay. So we make the people motivated before even joining the organization. But what we refer to as an EVP, Employee Value Proposition. It basically tells what type of environment you will be working in when you join this organization, what benefits, tangible or intangible, you will be rewarded for after being part of this organization. So if I value innovation, I'm going for Apple. Used to be Google. If I value learning, I would go to Google. If I appreciate more of a standard setup, I'll go to a bank, for example. And then from these banks, you decide which bank it fits you best. Is it conservative? Traditional bank, or is it an Islamic bank, or what have you? And it goes from there. Now, this is the beginning. The second would be, if I'm more of a innovative person, I would go to the most innovative organization. I know I will strive there. Why? Because they will talk my language. The onboarding, most likely they'll be using AI. They'll be using a lot of e-learning. Maybe I will do most of my work through an HR application. And the list goes on, and I know I will fit there forever. Most likely we're not going to be looking, too professional. It will be very casual, and most likely they won't really appreciate me being there on time, leaving on time, rather how creative I am in delivering my value. So it goes all the way in. The leader's role is then to complement this with coaching and knowing people one by one. What is their intrinsic, motivators, and what they really care about, and try to match that with their daily job. Now, the best of the leaders would push even further to help this employee to move to another even department, or to work for another leader for their own good.
So not just leaders, right? Employee motivation and well-being is also the purview of every organization's HR department.
Yes.
So what's the role that HR plays, and how can we ensure that HR continues to play a positive impact on employee motivation and well-being?
Well, HR plays a vital role in making sure that all the cultures are embedded in everything we do. Nonetheless, safety, well-being is essential, whether you have a set of values or not, because we're humans at the end. What I like to see more of the HR is being more invisible. So, in a sense that we have all the standard system procedures to make sure everyone is working in a safe environment, ergonomically, what have you. They have the right medical insurance, and they are ready to work during crisis. Now, this is the role of HR, and once things happen, people would feel that we did everything very well, and we did it all alone without the interference of HR. So this is where I see the ideal role of an HR nowadays. But now they're doing everything, by their own, and they're being blamed for not doing their role. And I do see it more of a 50-50, because at the end, a manager or a leader is responsible for the people as well. And they should tell HR if they mess up or they didn't deliver enough value.
Just connect the dots for me here between what we've spoken about, leadership, culture, and HR. How do these three different identities come together and help promote organizations, especially, say, for instance, in a situation where there's change afoot, people are traditionally very opposed to change.
Yes.
How do these three different variables work together to help overcome those difficulties and embrace change?
Excellent. So we have HR as an entity and leaders all over. The culture is the ocean where they all swim within. What they needed is the boat, which is a standardized business model procedures that bring them all together. And HR need to ensure, and with top management, that everything is talking the same language. So, for example, we have, every organization have an authority matrix, at which level is allowed to approve a budget, for example, or sign for a hiring. If this is consistent across the organization, then we will know if this organization should be flat or should be more of a hierarchical, more of a matrix organization, and HR needs to take that role. However, everything needs to be clear on what leaders need to do and how they should behave. And also HR with management need to ensure if the leader is not doing their part, or employee is not doing or not motivated enough to be part of this organization, to leave the organization.
So they all connect to one another?
Yes.
All right, so you mentioned a word earlier that I think we will begin to end this conversation on. And that word was crisis. Encountering crises, how do we overcome crises? What's the approach to crises? How does HR involve itself in crisis communication, for instance? You've got a lot of experience in this field. How have you handled crisis communications?
Well, I've been in 2 different organizations, actually 3, during crisis. The main thing that makes or break an organization is trust. So you need to build trust before you use it, before you need it. You need to know what people really care about. Where I saw organizations failed during a crisis, especially in COVID, for example, is that they don't have any line of communication except you need to do this, you need to do that. So people panic all of a sudden. They regretted they ever worked for this organization because they felt that this organization definitely will neglect them. Even if you did well, and these organizations they tried their best actually to genuinely care about their people were still skeptical. However, for other organizations, when they were always ready, they have their laptops on, they have their virtual systems on, it was just a minor transition. And HR did an amazing job because HR are people, they didn't know what will happen with COVID as well, but they were always proactive. So you need to be proactive, you need to make people feel safe by telling them that you know what's going on and you are there for them. And build that ecosystem of employee well-being all over, whether it's COVID or non-COVID, because a happy employee is a happy parent, is a happy family member. They will spread this happiness, this well-being, culture all over. And when they come to work, they will have more energy and more appreciation for their organization because you affected, positively their lives all over.
So we began this conversation by talking about the differences between Eastern leadership styles and Western leadership styles. And we've just spoken about how organizations encounter crises and the role that HR can play in overcoming those. How do those two connect with one another? How do those leadership styles affect the way that crises are handled?
Because we went back to the core, so they all will be acting the same. The leader needs to step up and do what is necessary to protect their people. I know one example, one of the leaders took all the employees' laptops and started delivering it to their homes while everyone was afraid to leave home. But he said that if I'm going to ask people to do the work, I'm not going to tell them to come to the office. I'll be the one who delivers office back to their homes. So this is more of a role model, of how things should be done. This example could be someone from the East or someone from the West. And it always goes back to genuine care. You are a successful leader if people feel good when they remember your name. They know that you make them feel different. If you are authentic, if you show vulnerability, and above all, they see you as a genuine person. We are all humans at the end. We don't have superpowers, but you really need to show every single day that you're there to give them the best life they could ever have. And their life is better is because of you.
Now, those are some fantastic sentiments, but I do have one final question to ask you. You mentioned COVID-19. That itself was obviously an incredibly stressful situation for everyone, but unfortunately we still live in a world that seems to be beset by crises every day, whether that be a war in the Ukraine or natural disasters and so on and so forth. What role can leaders and organizations play in making sure that when employees come into work and into the workplace, they feel motivated and they feel ready to have a good day?
Of course, we cannot control what happens, such a crisis or natural disasters, as you correctly said. What we need to do as organization, HR and leaders, is to ensure that people are always enrolled and attend well-being programs. Well-being programs are not only about, mentally being, well-being. It can be also financially well-being. It could be stress management. It could be better organization of the work, or actually redefining productivity all over again. So helping people to have more self-awareness, to know how to manage their stress even at home. And these are some of the programs that I delivered even to the people that I work with, to ensure that they're always in the right mental state day after day. So if something goes wrong in their country or their place, they're always ready to work at their best level. And of course, if they have a personal crisis or a challenge, we can ask them just to stay at home, or we can offer and extend our help to help them in their personal issue, while doing the work as a team.
Wow, some fantastic insights there, and I think a wonderful place to end the conversation. Abdulaziz, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much.